Hi everyone. Ooh, I'm nervous. So I would like to start my introduction by introducing the person that got me here, my son Royce, who's here on the floor today. This is Royce and he's 7 this year. I want you to look at the uniform he's wearing. It wasn't easy for either of us in the family. We went to 3 schools being rejected when we came back from Canada after seeking treatment, just because Royce had cancer. And we had these thick medical records walking around asking schools whether they were taking him in. Everyone felt sympathetic when they met him, and they felt moved by the story about how he had fought through cancer. But the moment they realized that he would have become a liability in school because he needed an adrenal shot, a shot of hydrocort if anything were to happen. And that scared everyone off. So I actually went from school to school telling teachers that I would pay for a nurse to come. I would get someone in to train them if you could take him in, because Royce always yearned of going to school. Growing up, Royce sees his brother going to school every day, and he would be at home with me. And every day he would be asking me, "Mom, when am I going to school?" Cancer took his childhood away. He didn't just take his childhood away. He took away our family, split the entire family apart. My eldest son was the only child for the first 5 years before the other 2 came. We were busy with Royce when he came, and then Ryder came right after. Right before Ryder turned 1, Royce was diagnosed with cancer when he was the age of 2. Since then, my eldest son had to become a caregiver to my youngest. Me and Royce were living in a 500 meter square hospital, and that was all we had for the last 2 years. Our life evolved around the luggage, constantly yanking the bag around with all these medical records, going from one clinic to the other. Royce was 2 when he was diagnosed with neuroblastoma stage 3. I remember the doctors asking me whether I knew the chances. That was the first time I actually broke down. But I remember about this particular Dr. Chitan in Singapore that told me, when I asked him that question, he said, "It's not about chances. We are all here to make sure that he wins this battle. We're all going to war with him, and we'll give him a good fight." And that gave me the drive each day. Royce underwent 6 rounds of chemotherapy, 3 surgeries that lasted 14 hours to 16 hours each, 12 rounds of radiotherapy, and cancer didn't end there. So we were, sorry. So after treatment in Singapore, Royce was accepted for immunotherapy in Canada under a clinical trial. When we arrived Canada, Royce developed pulmonary hypertension. It was so hard because when we thought everything was over, finally immunotherapy was there. There was a cure. And the doctor said that he couldn't go through immunotherapy because his heart was weak. I remember one day, Ryan had a fundraising, my eldest son. Royce, me and Ryan were going to school with my dad, going through all the tables, doing bits. And Royce started screaming for pain. Within a split second, he collapsed. I remembered running to the car. He stopped breathing. His lips turned blue. I know how much he scared Ryan. And we were shouting all the way. We were lucky we were just one corner away from the hospital. I remembered carrying my lifeless child, screaming, "Help, help, somebody help, take my child." The paramedics came so fast, took him off my hands, brought him into the emergency room. And the lady came up to me. "I need you to calm down, and I need you to tell me everything about your child." And my tears stopped immediately. And I had to remember all his records for the last 1 year. 2nd of July was the day he was diagnosed with neuroblastoma. 7th of July was the day he had his first surgery. 14th of July was the first chemotherapy. I remember all those dates. And I had to go through interviews after interviews just to remember, and I made sure that I could remember every single information and that was crucial and important for the doctors to decide. And I could see them incubated him. And that the whole time, I didn't cry. Then he woke up. I remember standing next to him. His eyes was open, but he kept telling me, "Mom, where are you?" He couldn't see. He kept shouting, "Mom, Mom, where are you?" I was touching his face, holding his hand, "Something here." He kept telling me he couldn't see me. Then I broke down again. And I started praying. And the doctor said they weren't sure whether it affected his neuro and whether he could see. They were not sure what's going on. So they brought us to the Sick Kids Hospital where he was treated. And I remember in the emergency, the ambulance, when we got there, I was messaging friends. I was texting for prayers. As we got to Sick Kids Hospital, the bed was this long. Doctors came, neurologists came, endocrinologists came. Everyone started writing on the bed about the symptoms, what happened, what the findings, what could possibly go wrong. That was our 2 weeks. For 2 weeks, every day we had charts going in the room. Every day going into from scanners, MRIs, blood tests. And no one knew what happened. Until today, no one really knew what happened. We were discharged after 2 weeks. But in that 2 weeks, we were showered with love. We were showered with messages. Friends and family kept us assured and safe. Royce received gifts every other day. Despite all that, it wasn't all so bad, because it gave me a lot of time with Royce. I became a nurse. I became a teacher. I became his friend. I became his everything. But I wouldn't have done this without my friends or family, without the people around us. All these moments, all these smiles, all this joy that came from the surrounding, everyone we had. Second picture of Royce holding his medication in hand was this last dose of Accutane, his oral chemo. He had so much joy in him each time. It teaches me how, I think that what happened when we found out that Royce had cancer, I was angry. I was in a very dark place. But he has taught me to be strong. He has taught me to cherish life. So this is our journey. We've come a long way. From our experience, from the people we've met in the hospitals, the people we've met visiting us, strangers that sat next to us and talk about him. He was carrying his oxygen tank around for a year. And we'd get random strangers coming up to us asking us, "How old are you, Royce?" And everyone would cheer him up and make him feel comfortable with what he had. He had hearing aids on. The first time we had hearing aids on, he would be used to complain that he didn't want it. So I remember that we had a book called Leo. And Leo had hearing aids, so I'd tell him the story every night and reminded him about how cool it was to have hearing aids. It wasn't easy. Each time a doctor comes up to me and tell me that I've got something to tell you, I've got bad news. Every time we think that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, something hits. Pulmonary hypertension is one. It wasn't so bad. And then the doctors come and tell you that his adrenal insufficiency. He's required to use a medical band on his hand. He had a portacat for chemo. Then Roy started having blood clots. So I had to be his nurse. I had to inject him every single day, one on the left, one on the right, the next day on the thigh, on the left, and then on the right, and the cycle continues for 1 year. Every night Royce would scream his life away. There was just one. And then his thyroid's not working well. There's another drama to deal with. We had to figure out a medication. We had to pick up medication on time. We don't have unfortunately in Sarawak, we don't have a pediatric endocrinologist. So we have to fly. We finally found one doctor in KL. So every 2 months, me and Royce have to fly to KL to see the doctor, to see his progress. Making sure that he was on the correct dose. Too much steroid, he's not going to grow well. Too little of it, he's not going to function. So it's that fine line that we're living on every day. Then his hearing loss. When we went to school, we realized that the schools here are not equipped for children with disabilities. That's when we were talking about, I'm in the committee for SCCS, and I keep telling them, there's so many challenges that we face after cancer. As a caregiver, it doesn't end the day the cancer ends. The cancer goes away, but everything else stays. The wound stays, the fear you live with stays forever. That's when when we and our friends discussed. And we wanted to start the Royce Foundation. Because we thought caring for carers was very important. Because it is an ongoing thing that's going to last forever. I'm not the only caregiver for Royce. My son, Brian, is constantly reminded that he will be the caregiver for Royce one day. Because I may not be here tomorrow. And I'm going to ensure that if whatever happens to me, the people around him will continue taking care of him. I have all my staff understand his medical condition. Every time he has a medical checkup, I bring people with me to understand what he has, to know the medication he's on. Every time he goes to school, seeing a new teacher, I have to go through the entire process of explaining about what he's gone through. Please be a bit more empathetic about him. Please be a bit more careful with him. Please make sure that if there's any sign or if he's not well, please tell me, because he will never tell. Royce has lived his life being afraid of missing out in life. Whenever he's sick, he will never tell you he's sick. He'll just continue playing until he collapses. So these little signs are things that we have to constantly educate people around Royce. And those are the caregivers. The teachers that took him in, we've been very lucky. Royce missed out 3 years of his good life studying. So he had to pick up learning ABC, 1, 2, 3, when his younger brother was very way ahead of him. My life as a caregiver was not easy. but I would have never been able to get through this if I didn't have the support system around me. Being a caregiver is not about being the immediate caregiver. Being a caregiver is being a caregiver, a person that will be there for the caregiver itself, reaching out to someone. I know for a fact that I was very lucky. I've met many families in the hospital that was not as lucky as I. My mother would come with clean clothes for me. My friends would come after work to have bedside play with Roy so I could get away and shower. I've seen mothers by the bedside taking care of the child 24/7 when the husband's working or taking care of the other kids. I've seen families separated for years, going through leukemia. And I've seen the strain that goes in the relationship in the family that comes from diseases like this especially. So today I think what I'm trying to say is, I'm trying to tell everyone to not judge. This is my personal experience. I don't know how many of you are familiar receiving messages like this. I've received messages where people will message me and ask me, do you know that you're killing your child with poison? Who's taking care of the kids when you're here? What do you do when it made your child get cancer? And how can you work if your child is sick? Every time I receive messages like this, it breaks me. I'm trying so hard to be polite to reply. I need so much strength to reply and not be angry. But today I've learned to be more selfish and ignore. I've learned to love myself more and to not care so much about how the other person feels. And I've learned to tell people off when it's not right. And my mission in life today is to educate carers that it's okay to tell people you're not doing well. It's okay to shout. It's okay to be upset. It's okay to tell people that you need help. And I advise to people is do not assume that everything is well when a person smiles in the picture. Do not ask if they're well, because there's a high chance that they're not. I think it's time for us to start caring. And it's also time to start helping. Rosalind Carter said it first, and she said it best. There are only 4 kinds of people in this world. Those who have been carers, caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need to be caregivers. If we remember all this, we remember to start caring for others. Thank you.